Welcome to Journalist Roundtable. I'm Larry Casper. Our guests are Taylor Milard from the Delaware Valley Journal, Harrison Cann from City and State Pennsylvania, and J.D. Prose from PennLive and the Patriot News. J.D., we'll start with you. We're set for a Joe Biden-Donald Trump rematch for president in November, and there's a new poll that shows who has the edge currently in Pennsylvania. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Larry, it was a Bloomberg Morning Consult poll of various swing states. Pennsylvania, obviously being a perpetual swing state, was included in that. In the poll, when they included other third-party candidates, such as RFK Jr., Jill Stein, Cornel West, Trump led Biden 45-36. With the other candidates getting various percentages. I believe RFK Jr. had the most among the third-party candidates with 8%. When they went head-to-head, just Trump and Biden, Trump still led 49-43. So he still had a lead outside the margin of error, which I believe was 3%. So, looks like, good news, obviously, for Trump supporters. It was kind of an outlier with some of the other polls that have showed a much closer races within the margin of error, and some with Biden usually leading by a point or two.
In the poll we're talking about, JD, how significant is that 9% lead anyway?
Well, in Pennsylvania, it's pretty significant. If it holds true. Like I said, it opened a lot of eyes just because of that difference.
What do you suppose the issues are that voters trust Trump on, JD? Can you tell us?
Yeah, just let me put my glasses on.
Take your time.
Basically, he had support really almost across the board with voters on handling crime, immigration, China, guns, the Ukraine-Russian conflict, Israel-Hamas war, handling the fentanyl crisis. Biden had some support from, more support saying he could better handle things like abortion and climate change. But it was sort of overwhelmingly Trump on these very high-profile issues.
JD, how much progress has Trump made building up support in recent months?
That's a good question because of I believe because of the Nikki Haley factor and how much those sort of anti-Trump Republicans were gravitating toward her, obviously with Pennsylvania's primary being so late in the game, and she's withdrawn. Really it's going to be kind of hard to gauge that in a primary, and I think you're going to see more polling closer to the general election, and maybe some of those Haley voters, you can be able to tell if they're gravitating toward Biden at that point or falling back in line with the Republican Party and Trump.
In the headline of a story you wrote, voters called Biden old and Trump dangerous. Any details as to why they arrived at these characterizations?
No real details. It was 41% called Biden too old, and 10% said Trump, but then 39% said both of them are too old.
There's only a few years between them, isn't there?
Yeah, Biden, the president, is obviously 81 years old. Trump turned 78 in June. So there's only a 3-year difference between them. But I think a lot of that obviously is sort of the national conversation, the echo chamber going around about Biden and some of his stumbles that Trump doesn't necessarily, he gets press and everything for them, but Biden seems to be getting a lot more attention to some of his gaffes and everything, and I think that's a reflection of that. And it just sort of perpetuates itself, the conversation. Whether that continues up until the general election, remains to be seen. Obviously, if they have debates it's going to be pretty apparent sort of the energy levels of both during those debates.
Now, there are 8 months until the election, so this poll just came out. But what could happen during this considerable window of time? I mean, as they say, polls are a snapshot in time, almost as a disclaimer.
Yeah, I mean, anything could change depending on the circumstances. Obviously, Trump's various legal issues, if they have any effect on polls at this point, everybody's well aware of what he's facing. Biden's not going to get any younger, so the age factor, does he change minds, one way or the other? Does things get worse for him, or do things get better? Does he sort of turn that around?
Harrison, let's get you involved and talk about another important race, particularly here in Pennsylvania, and that would be the race for Attorney General. And there were 5 Democrats at last count anyway, so who's making the most progress running up to the April primary amongst these numerous Democrats?
Yeah, there's still quite a few in the field. We have 5 Dems and 2 Republicans at this point. The Democrats, although the party itself didn't nominate any individual candidate, within the party's meetings in December, the former Auditor General Eugene DePasquale did receive the most support during those endorsement meetings, but not enough to receive a full-fledged endorsement. So at this point, it's him on the Democratic side alongside State Rep Jared Solomon from Philadelphia, Delaware County District Attorney Jack Stolzheimer, former Bucks County Solicitor Joe Cann, and here Bradford Gray, who is also a chief public defender, or former Philadelphia chief public defender.
Harrison, what are the issues that can attract attention during a campaign for Attorney General?
A lot of the issues tend to be more national, and now that we are in a presidential election cycle. So there is a lot of talk about voting rights, reproductive rights, particularly on the Democratic side. Candidates vowing to protect the women's right to choose and to protect the security of elections as well. Big crime and public safety issues as well. Like JD mentioned, that some voters are concerned about. Within the Philadelphia region, a lot of gun and drug issues that look to be addressed. A lot of the prosecutors in these races are trying to promote their experience in that area to try to say that they can crack down on some of these public safety issues.
Harrison, I noticed in one of your stories about this race for Attorney General that you wrote about the requirements for the candidates that are running for Attorney General. For instance, there's an age minimum. You have to live here so long. And particularly this last one, you have to be a member of the bar of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Is that fairly exclusive company? Can you talk about that last requirement?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how that requirement in Pennsylvania relates to some other states, but I do think it is worth mentioning that based on those requirements, we've had plenty of AGs in the past move on to do bigger things. Two of our more recent AGs were Tom Corbett and Josh Shapiro, who both went on to hold the governor's office.
And you have to be at least age 30, and you have to have lived here at least 7 years, right?
Correct.
Hey, Larry, if I could just...
Please do. Jump in.
I have a question for Harrison. I'm just wondering, politically with, Eugene has the years as Auditor General, sort of a base out there in South Central PA, out here in the West. He lives out here now. I was just curious with those other candidates sort of, being Southeast and Eastern PA, would politically, do they sort of cannibalize the primary vote out there and maybe let him, have the rest of the state?
Yeah, that's a good point. I have seen DePasquale pick up quite a few endorsements in Central and Western PA, like you mentioned. But I would say that Stolzheimer being from Delaware County and Solomon and Bradford Gray being from Philadelphia, they might, take a little bit of that Southeast county race from each other, but I don't think they're too geographically similar.
Hey, Harrison, a few minutes ago you mentioned, well, a pretty long list of all the candidates that are participating in this race. And I'm not sure among those candidates was the Republican who's pulling ahead here. Would you care to go over that again?
Yeah, sure thing. David Sunday, the York County District Attorney, is the lead candidate on the Republican side. He did receive the endorsement from the party late last year, I believe. And that led to Kat Copeland dropping out, but State Rep Craig Williams actually vowed to stay in the race, and he still remains in the race at this point.
Taylor, let's get you involved and talk about a story you wrote, and the headline read, GOP makes gains in Delaware Valley voter registration numbers. First of all, why would Delaware Valley be of a special interest to the candidates in this race?
Well, when it comes to the candidates in the race, specifically in Delaware Valley, what we've seen is where Del Val was a Democratic stronghold, at least with the way that it flipped over the years, going from a Republican stronghold to a Democrat one. What the Republican Party and both the national and kind of the state Republican Party, along with the local Republican Party, has decided is that they really want to build up their base there. They think that some of the gains that they made in the local elections, even though there was a big pushback last year in the school board elections, but when you look at what happened with that, Republicans see an opportunity. They see people, they see congresswomen like Congresswoman Susan Wild. They look at Madeline Dean's race. They look at Mary Gay Scanlon. They look at all of these representatives, all these Democrat representatives, and they think that they see an opportunity, whether it involves the Israel issue, whether it involves the economy or crime. They think that they can the Republicans think that they can take a lead on that and really push forward and make even more gains. The question, of course, is you have people out there, you have voters out there who really aren't interested in identifying with either the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, whether they're people who consider themselves unaligned, unaffiliated, nonpartisan, whether they're people who think the Democrat Party is too far left or maybe not left enough, whether they think the Republican Party is too much under the specter of Trump, for lack of a better comment. And they think that they're getting a little bit too focused on the centralizing power. So they look at other places, which is why you see the unaffiliated and independent voters rise, as well as some of the votes or some of the registrations with the Republican and the Democrat Party.
Taylor, give us some more perspective on the situation in Delaware Valley, especially for the benefit of our viewers statewide. How big a block of voters are we talking about in Delaware Valley?
I mean, we're talking about multiple millions of people who live in the Delaware Valley. It is, well, it's obviously not as big as, say, Philadelphia. It is still a sizable chunk, and it's a chunk that at times can be ignored from time to time, or kind of seems like it can be ignored from time to time, even though if you look at Josh Shapiro, Governor Shapiro came from the Delaware Valley. You look at Jack Stolzheimer, who is running for Attorney General on the Democrat side. He's the Delaware County District Attorney. Obviously, you have Dave Sunday, who is kind of Delaware Valley adjacent, Craig Williams, who is in the Delaware Valley. It becomes kind of a feeding ground for statewide politicians, even though it sometimes seems like it gets ignored because people get focused on Philadelphia and Harrisburg and Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh.
So Republicans are reporting progress on voter registration in Delaware Valley, but the Democratic overall voter registration is still ahead, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What you see when it comes to registration is both parties actually made gains in their numbers. You had one thing that you had was that GOP registration in Chester County went from 149,000 to 151,000 for Republicans. But Democrats went from 156,000 to 158,000. That's, a really good jump. Obviously, in Bucks County is where Republicans think that they're going to make the biggest gains from a number standpoint. They're really tight with Democrats. Democrats lost registrations from around 198,000 to 197,000, whereas Republicans went from 193,000 to 195,000. So there are still gains that Republicans see that they can make. Democrats are obviously still making gains too. You have people who, whether they get out of college, whether they just kind of let their voter registration with the party, they kind of decide to switch from Republican to Democrat or independent to Republican, Democrat to Republican. It just kind of depends. But you are seeing some shifts.
JD, let's go back to you. I know you're covering the race for Congress, District 10 in Congress, and that would include Scott Perry. And the headline to the story I'm thinking about reads, Scott Perry is slightly favored in District 10. So immediately I'm intrigued. Just how much of an advantage is slightly favored?
Not much nowadays. That was based on the most recent ratings from the Cook Political Report, one of probably the most respected political analysis firms out there. That's been the same since late last year when they moved it from likely Republican, sort of downgraded it. If you're a Republican, if you're Scott Perry, they downgraded it to lean Republican. That was after former TV anchor Janelle Stetson got into the Democratic primary, and Cook sort of labeled her at the time the automatic front runner based on her name recognition, across the region and everything. There's 6 Democrats in that race. I haven't checked this morning to see if anyone's dropped out or anything. But, it's a crowded field, and Democrats are eyeing that race as a potential flip. Perry has been, involved in controversy with Trump, with the insurrection, fighting the FBI over access to his cell phone during investigations and everything. And he's, a very conservative member, former chair of the House Freedom Caucus. Democrats see that district, which did vote for Shapiro against State Senator Mastriano in the governor's race. It's got Democrats, salivating for that, and it's opened up some avenues for Republicans unhappy. There's this Republicans Against Perry group that's working in the district also. There was a gentleman who said he was going to come out and challenge Perry in the primary, didn't end up filing. So, it looks like it's going to be the congressman versus whoever survives the Democratic primary.
Well, JD, now that you put it that way, you did point out that there are about half a dozen Democrats running for this office. But then, as you also said, Perry is in effect unopposed in this primary. So what is he doing campaign-wise right now? Or is he keeping his head low until the general election?
Right now, up to now, it seems like he's just keeping his head low, going about his business as a congressman, basically sort of keeping his powder dry, I guess you could say. No real need for him to, spend a lot of money and get out there yet. Probably best to wait to see who ends up coming out of Democratic primary and, having a very busy summer.
And as far as you're concerned, JD, who's making the most progress amongst the Democrats running in the primary for Attorney General? I think Congress 10. Sorry, I confused my races. We're still talking about Congress 10, JD. Sorry.
Yeah. I think, again, simply based off of name recognition, Janelle Stetson been sort of seen as...
that's Stelson, by the way.
Sorry, mispronounced it. Yeah, she's seen as sort of the front runner, if there could be one in this race, because everybody knows her. She's been on TV for decades. That helps a lot,
Right.
with people just knowing your name and knowing who you are. I think that gives her obviously a distinct advantage out there talking to voters and just getting her name out there.
Taylor, let's go to you and talk about the Independent Fiscal Office, the IFO. And with respect to revenue projections for the state, the governor's numbers and the IFO's numbers don't match. What is the difference?
And they were off by about $8 million was the difference between what the IFO said and what Governor Shapiro's office said. The governor's office liked to give kind of a rosy picture of what it looked like and what the state finances look like. One of the things that they would like to do is they'd like to spend about $8 million, a little bit more than that, for when it comes to education. They want to spend a lot of money on education. And the IFO was sitting there saying, "Hey, the projections are off. They're off by, I think I said million earlier. They're off by by 8 billion is what they're off by, and that's obviously a huge number if you want to spend that money." Yeah, just a little bit. What you see is the Shapiro's office. And again, it's not surprising. You see this on a federal level too. You'll see the administration, the White House, doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat, will sit there and say, "Oh, hey, we have all these lofty projections," and you'll have an independent, whether it's the Congressional Budget Office or the Independent Financial Office, come back and say, "Hey, no, they're a little bit lower, or maybe they're going to taper off a little bit more." That's where the big difference is between the governor's office and the IFO at the moment.
And Taylor, one more question on this subject. The gentleman that runs the IFO, that would be Matt Niddle, gave testimony at the Capitol recently, and he says that the general fund surplus and rainy day fund would be exhausted by 2026. What'll happen to that money as far as he's concerned? Where will it go?
Well, the money would be used by the legislature and by the government to fund the programs that the governor's office has said that he wants to fund, whether it be additional spending for education. Again, that's the big thing that that Governor Shapiro is talking about, that he really wants to focus on education, especially with the with the report that came out. You had the federal judge say that the way that Pennsylvania is funding its education right now, that's unconstitutional. So they come up with a new formula, and that was released at the end of last year. The proposal that the governor's office supports, as well as Democrats in the legislature. Republicans don't feel that way. They think that it's way too much spending. They think that it doesn't give people enough choice. It doesn't give students enough choice, whether it be scholarships, whether it be school vouchers, whatever you want to call it. And so what the IFO said, and the head of the IFO said, was that if this spending contributes, and it's not just education, it's on a bunch of other programs, but if this spending continues, it's going to drain the rainy day fund. And even though Shapiro has said that a few like Standards and Poor's and Moody's, that they need to spend some of the money in the rainy day fund, because that will look good for S&P and for Moody's. The head of the IFO was like, "I've never heard that, so I don't know where that comes from." So there's obviously dispute between the IFO and the governor's office.
Harrison, let's bring you back in and consider a Pennsylvania program that repairs homes that could go nationwide. And tell us briefly, how does that program work?
It's referred to as the Whole Homes Repair Program. And it was passed in the state legislature 2 years ago in bipartisan fashion, originally introduced by Philadelphia Democrat Nikhil Saval. And that program over the last year or so, as repairs and renovations have been occurring at the local level, we've seen a crazy increase in popularity of the program.
And now Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman is taking this on the national stage, isn't he?
Yeah, so he introduced a bipartisan version of the bill at the federal level alongside Wyoming Senator, Republican Senator Loomis. And yeah, that federal bill just seeks to kind of create a 5-year pilot program of the version of the program that was been running in the Commonwealth for the past year or so.
Harrison, briefly, what is John Fetterman's history with having his name attached to specific legislation or a bill?
Yeah, well, I mean, his name has come up quite a bit in the headlines for various reasons.
And often it's about his health, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes about his health, his social media posts, his stance on some of our foreign affairs. But this in particular, he's been very supportive of the whole homes repair program back even when he was still lieutenant governor. He was a supporter of affordable housing programs, and he endorsed Saval for his reelection run, and then had been working with Saval's office to translate that language to the federal level, because they see the popularity in Pennsylvania.
JD, we have less than 2 minutes left in our program. I'm going to give you the last word because I want to know about the Pennsylvania city that has been inducted into the brand new Banana Hall of Fame. So don't keep us in suspense. Give.
I know we have to split, so I'll keep it quick.
But
which city earned this distinction?
Latrobe, PA, in Westmoreland County. Was named one of the 3 inaugural inductees to the Dole Banana Hall of Fame. Dole Foods, obviously, global fruit company. It's part of their 125th celebration of being in the banana business. And they named Latrobe to the Hall of Fame because Latrobe is home of the banana split. That it was created there by a soda jerk. Not an insulting term. That's what people called him.
Exactly, soda jerk, right?
Yeah, created at a pharmacy in 1904 in Latrobe, and obviously became very popular throughout the country. And they have a festival every August to celebrate the banana split, and big celebration and family fun, et cetera, et cetera. And so Dole picked them to be one of the inaugural inductees into the Hall of Fame.
Okay, JD, congratulations to Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Our guests have been Taylor Milard from the Delaware Valley Journal, Harrison Cann from City and State, Pennsylvania, and JD Prose from PennLive and the Patriot News. Thanks, everyone. That's it for Journalist Roundtable this week. I'm Larry Casper. Thanks for watching.